A young'un sent me something a while back, scanned copies of a deed to a piece of property he bought hisself back in 2006. And in that deed, there's a line his own lawyer couldn't explain. Here's the question that's kept me up more nights than I care to admit. How does a clause, one line, forbidding a particular room in that house from ever being used to sleep in, end up wrote, word for word, in every deed to that property, going back over 100 years? Now, I've read plenty of strange thing in my time, young'un, but I ain't never seen a legal paper repeat a warning like that generation after generation without one soul ever writing down why. I've turned it over for months now. Still don't have an answer that sets easy with me. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what Cody found, the same way he found it. And I want you asking yourself the same thing I have, not whether you'd believe a ghost story, but whether you'd sign your name to a paper that told you plain as day there's a room in your own house you ain't allowed to close your eyes in. Before I get into what Cody sent me, for them just settling in, name's Elias. Papaw Elias, if you're kindly. I'm out here 2 nights a week, Saturdays and Sundays, and if you mean to keep coming back to this porch, I'd take it as a kindness if you'd subscribe. Hit that like button, too, if it's earned it, so more folks find their way here. Now, let me tell you how Cody come to find that clause in the first place. Cody Boggs, that's the young'un's name, 40-some years old, lives up in the eastern part of the state. Bought hisself a piece of property back in 2006, out past the blacktop, up a holler, same as most of what I tell you about. Good land, good house, fair price. Wasn't nothing unusual about the sale, near as Cody tells it, right up till the closing table. That's where his lawyer, young feller hisself, name of Grady Hensley, stopped reading the deed out loud, went quiet a second, and read it again to hisself. There, in the middle of all the ordinary language about boundary lines and mineral rights, was one clause that didn't belong, forbidding one particular room of that house from ever being used as a bedroom. Not recommended against, not advised. Forbidden, plain as anything else in that deed. Now, I've had lawyers on this porch before, young'un. Good ones, sharp ones. Never one of 'em heard tell of a clause quite like that. And I want you to sit with that a minute, same as Cody had to. 'Cause the question ain't just why somebody wrote it. It's why every soul that's owned that land since has gone right on letting it stand. Now, to understand how strange this got, you got to understand the house itself. It's an old farmhouse, added on to more than once over the years, setting up on a rise with the back of it facing a ridge that don't get much sun of a morning. The room in question is in the back, northeast corner. If you're standing outside looking at it, decent-sized room. Window looks straight out at the tree line. Nothing about it, to hear Cody tell it, looks any different from any other room in that house. Cody found the listing same as anybody does these days online through an agent working out of the county seat. Drove out on a Saturday to walk through it, liked it well enough the first time, come back a second time with his own daddy, just to get another set of eyes on the roof and the foundation. Neither one of 'em thought twice about that back room. Walked through it same as any other, noted the window needed recaulking, noted the floor was solid oak under the carpet, moved on to the kitchen. The family selling it to him, the Mullinses, who'd had the place since 1962, never lived in that room theirselves, far as Cody could tell, used it for storage, sewing machine, some boxes, an old chest of drawers. When Cody asked Wendell Mullins about the clause, straight out at the closing, Wendell just shrugged and said his own daddy'd told him the same thing when he bought the place. Don't sleep in that room, and don't ask why. Wendell never had asked. Said he figured some things a body just don't need explained to obey. Cody, being younger and a good deal more curious than Wendell, figured different. First thing Cody done, natural enough, was assume it was something the Mullinses put in theirselves. Some family superstition, maybe, dressed up in lawyer language to make it stick better than just telling the next owner and hoping they'd listen. Made sense to him. Old families get particular about a house they've lived in that long. Cody figured he'd humor it. Wasn't costing him nothing to leave one room as an office instead of a bedroom, and went on moving in, not thinking much more on it. He did mention it once, casual-like, to a neighbor down the road, an older fella who'd lived in that holler his whole life. Neighbor just laughed it off, said every old house in that part of the country's got some story or another attached to it, half of 'em made up by bored folks with nothing better to do of an evening. Told Cody not to waste his time on it. Cody took that for good sense at the time and let it be. Wasn't till near a year later, getting his own paperwork in order for the county, that Cody got curious enough to pull the deed from before his, the one where Wendell Mullins bought the place hisself back in 1962. Wanted to see, out of plain curiosity, whether the clause was Wendell's own wordin' or something he'd copied off a template. He requested the copy from the courthouse, and when it come in the mail, he set it right down next to his own deed to compare 'em, line for line. Word for word, young'un. The clause in the 1962 deed, the one Wendell Mullins signed when he first bought that property, matched Cody's own deed almost exact. Same forbiddance, same room, described the same way. A few words moved around like it had been retyped by a different hand at some point, but the heart of it identical, which meant it wasn't Wendell's doing at all. Wendell didn't write that clause into his deed when he bought the place. He inherited it, same as Cody just had, from whoever sold it to him. Now, that stopped Cody cold. He'd been thinking about this the whole time as something recent, some notion the Mullins family cooked up and stuck onto the paperwork before they sold. But if it was already there in 1962, that meant the story didn't start with them at all. Cody quit thinking about the one owner right in front of him and started wondering just how far back that clause actually went. Let me stop you right there a second, before Cody goes digging any further back, 'cause what he found next is the reason I still can't shake this one. I'm always curious where this porch reaches of an evening, so if you'll do me a kindness, drop me a comment and tell me what town or county you're listening from tonight. And if you've ever pulled an old deed on a piece of property yourself and found something in it that didn't sit right, I'd be obliged to hear about that too. Now, back to Cody and that courthouse basement. Cody went down to that courthouse hisself and started asking for every deed on file for that property, clear back as the records went. That basement ain't much to look at. Concrete floor, flickering lights, metal shelving stacked with boxes. Some clerk decades back never bothered labeling proper. Smelled like old paper and mildew, Cody told me, the kind of smell that gets into your clothes and don't leave easy. Boxes of it, most never touched in decades. He'd have give up probably if it wasn't for a clerk down there, woman name of Loretta Stamper, worked county records near 20 years, who got curious right along with him once she seen what he was after. Together, they pulled the 1938 deed. Clause was there. Different typewriter looked like, but same wording, near enough. Took the better part of 3 weeks, all told. Cody driving up after work most evenings, Loretta pulling boxes on her lunch hours, both of them getting more invested in it than either one probably meant to. Somewhere along the way, in a deed from around 1922, they found the one variation in all of it, a single deed where the clause was wrote out longer than usual, adding the words as has always been observed before ending the same as all the rest. Whoever wrote that one, it seemed, felt a need to remind whoever read it that this wasn't new, that it had always been this way. Pulled the transfer before that from 1911, a man named Cody Boggs, selling to the family that'd go on to sell to the Mullinses. And there it was again, same clause. That one wrote out slower, more careful, like whoever done the typing wanted to be sure they got every word of it right. Cody noticed the name straight off, same as I did reading it. Boggs being his own name, too. Holler that size, Boggs is common enough a name he figured it for coincidence and didn't chase it no further. But he did allow, telling it to me, that it give him a strange feeling, seeing his own surname setting right there on a document that old, selling off the very ground he'd end up owning 100 years later. 1911, young'un, was the oldest deed the courthouse had on file for that property. First one ever recorded official in the county's own book. And the clause was already there, waiting, like it'd been standing guard the whole time records existed to hold it. Loretta told Cody she'd worked that basement most of her adult life and never once come across a clause repeated that many times, that consistent, on one piece of ground. Now, 1911. Being the oldest deed on file, Cody figured that was as far back as this thing went. Loretta figured different. Said sometimes when a piece of property's got some kind of dispute or unusual history to it, there's papers filed alongside the deed, probate records, estate settlements, that don't always get cataloged the same way. Worth a look, she told him. So they pulled the estate file attached to that 1911 sale, and inside it, tucked in with the inventory of the deceased's belongings, was a family Bible, old one, coming apart at the binding, that had been listed as part of the estate. Bible itself was a big one, leather cover cracked clean through at the spine, pages gone the color of weak coffee, had the family record pages up front, births and deaths wrote out in generations of different handwriting, same as most old family Bibles do. One entry, dated the winter of 1893, just gave a name and an age, 4 years old, with no cause listed, which Loretta told Cody wasn't unusual for the time. Lot of families back then just wrote the fact of it and left the rest unsaid. Then, tucked a few pages further in, was the margin note. Somebody, at some point, had wrote in the margin of that Bible, in a hand none of the county records could put a name to. I'm going to read it to you the way Cody read it to me, near as the old writing allows. The back room, the one facing the ridge, is not to be slept in, not since the hard winter. We buried what needed burying and said what needed saying over it, and there is nothing left in that room but a chill that don't leave with spring. Whoever keeps this house after us, mind the room. We are not fixing to explain it twice. That's the whole of it, young'un. No date, no name signed to it, just that. No date on the writing itself. But the estate papers filed around it did have one. The deceased's date of death, listed plain, 18 and 94. Loretta cross-checked that against the county's old church burial records, still kept on file from a congregation that don't meet no more, and sure enough, found a burial listed that same winter, matching age and month both. Didn't have a cause of death wrote down, same as the Bible didn't, but it confirmed the date wasn't just family memory gone soft over the years. Somebody dug a grave that winter and wrote it down twice in two separate places, without either record ever explaining why the back room mattered to any of it. Now here's what turned the whole thing sideways for Cody, same as it did for me when I got to this part. That county didn't start formally recording deeds the way we understand it, official book, courthouse filing, all of it, till around 1900, near as the clerk's office could tell Cody. Before that, land changed hands on handshake, on private paper, on whatever the families involved agreed was good enough between theirselves. Which means that Bible entry, mind the room, wrote in a hand nobody could name, was put down years before there was ever a courthouse book to put a clause into in the first place. So the question ain't who wrote that clause first, young'un. The question is whether anybody rightly did, or whether it was just understood, quiet, inside that family long before the day come that somebody sat down and thought to make it official. Now, I've turned this over more nights than I care to count, same as I told you at the start, and here's as far as I ever got with it. The family that wrote in that Bible lost a 4-year-old child in the hard winter of 1893. 94, that much the record shows plain, backed up twice over now. What it don't show, and what I don't reckon anybody living can rightly tell you, is why that particular room got singled out the way it did. Maybe the child took sick in that room or died in it, and grief did what grief does to a family that's got no proper way to talk about it. Turned a room they couldn't bear to enter into a room nobody was allowed to enter, and one generation soft-pedaled that into the next, till we don't talk about it became we don't sleep there, and somebody down the line with enough learning to know how deeds and clauses worked decided the safest way to keep it from ever being forgot again was to put it in writing the law itself would respect, language that'd outlive every soul who remembered the why of it. That's one way of setting with it, and it's the one I lean toward on my better days. Grief does strange things to a family's rules. I've seen it myself, more than once, in more houses than this one. The other way is simpler to say and harder to shake, that whatever come into that room during that hard winter never did leave when they buried who needed burying, that the family wasn't just grieving, they were containing something and knew it, and were careful enough and scared enough to make sure that carefulness got passed down in writing strong enough that a stranger 130 years later would still be minding it without ever knowing why. I can't tell you which one's true. Cody can't neither. Cody's still living in that house today, far as I know. Uses that back room for an office now, desk, a couple bookshelves, nothing more. Says he don't think about it most days. He's had folks over plenty of time since cookouts, his sister's family staying a weekend here and there, and not one of 'em's ever asked to sleep in that back room on account of it just looking like an office to anybody walking through. Desk, bookshelves, a filing cabinet with them same courthouse copies in the bottom drawer. Wouldn't strike a stranger as anything but ordinary. But he told me straight out, and I believe him. He ain't never once, not one night in near 20 years, tried sleeping in there, not to test it, not out of curiosity even, which for a man who dug through a courthouse basement for a year is saying something. Says some questions a body's better off leaving unanswered, even the ones you went and dug up yourself. The door to that room stays shut come evening. Has every night since he moved in. He didn't tell me that was a rule he set for himself. Just something he noticed one day that he'd already been doing a good while. Now, before I let you go tonight, I want to ask you something serious. If you'd bought that house and found that clause the same day Cody did, would you have gone digging the way he did? Or would you have done what Wendell Mullins done for 40-some years and just let it stand without asking why? Tell me down in the comments which one you'd have been. If this porch is one you mean to keep coming back to, I'd be obliged if you'd subscribe Saturdays and Sundays, same as always, with another one waiting on you. Next time, I got a cowso about a preacher who wouldn't set foot in a particular house past dark and never would say why. For tonight, though, that clause is still standing, same as it stood for near 130 years. And that door's still shut. I still got them scans Cody sent me, saved on this old computer of mine. Pull 'em up sometimes late of an evening and read that Bible entry over again, trying to picture the hand that wrote it. I don't reckon I'll ever know who they were, or what they buried that hard winter, or whether a body ought to be more afeard of what's in that room, or of how easy grief turns into law when nobody's left to ask questions of it. Both them things scare me about the same, if I'm honest. Whoever they were, they got their wish. Near 130 years on, and folks are still minding the room. Still not fixin' to explain it twice.